Hello again. Welcome to a training video on the security system in PayPak Professional 4.0 and other Greynote software products. This video focuses on the database access screen. There are other related videos which explain specific security features in greater detail, and I recommend that you invest a few minutes to take a look at them and master your knowledge of the security system. So let's log in and show you how it works. The security options are found under the admin section of the menu, and you click on the security button, and it's important to point out that only administrators are allowed into the security section of the program. Users, regular users, and supervisors cannot access the security section of the software. This window here is the main security window. It shows the name of the server that you're connected to, the name of the database you're connected to, and you have some options here. You've got logins, groups, users, reset table rights, database access, which is the focus of this particular video, and you've got menu access, report access, email settings, and video. There are training videos for this section here, logins, groups, users. It includes the reset table rights option. There's also a separate training video for menu access, for report access, and for email settings. And I recommend that you have a look at that, at each of those, because if you are looking at the database access, that means that you are necessarily involved in the security settings, and you should need to know, you should have a good working knowledge of how the complete security system works. So let's start by going into the database access screen, and here it is. I'm going to give you a brief explanation of how this screen should be used. Then we'll look at the layout of the screen, and then we'll go into detail as to how it works. This screen is not a place for dummies to go messing around. Let me repeat that. This screen is not a place for dummies to go messing around. If you have a fuse box and you have an electrician and you are not an electrician, you do not go playing with your fuse box. So this is a very important part of the software, and anyone who comes in here to make any changes should know what they are doing. Otherwise, you can find yourself in very serious trouble. Your system could be disabled. It could mean the difference between your payroll. If you're using PayPak 4, it could mean the difference between your staff being paid and not being paid. It could mean, if you're using a billing software, it could mean the difference between your sales on your invoices, the capability to do sales and invoices coming to a complete halt. So be very careful for anyone who has administrative rights in using this screen, a database access. There are some cases where a person is the owner of a business and they have full administrative rights. That does not mean that they're an IT expert or the person's a database expert. I've had cases where someone who owned a business came into this screen, decided that these options in here should be turned off, and it stopped the normal operation of the software. They were unable to run transactions until that was corrected. So that's the first caution. The purpose of this screen, the primary purpose of this screen, is to make sure that everything is organized and arranged in the way that it should be. So it's more like an inspection tool where you check to make sure that everything is plugged in or configured the way that it should be, and it should always be in that state. Most other screens that we will be showing you in the demos are screens where you are adding records, you're printing reports, you're actually doing something, you're changing things, you're modifying, you're deleting records. This is not that type of screen. Okay? This is a screen where you want to make sure that things are plugged in and left alone. Just like your fuse box, your meter box, whatever you term to call it, even your electric meter or your water meter, it sits there, it does its job, and you don't disturb it. So, having said that, let's go into exactly what it does. It sets the rights which users have to the database tables. There are plenty of database tables in most of our software products. These are the tables listed here in PayPak Professional. There are 90 of them. And there are various types of rights which you can set. Select will allow you to select records. Insert will allow you to add records. Update will allow you to update records. And delete allows you to delete records. So you are basically coming into this screen to assign table rights to groups and users. Okay, so at the top of the screen you've got the server name, the database name that you're currently connected to. You've got an option here, these four options underneath it. These represent the currently selected group or user. So right now it's the first group, the first entry in the list, which is a group. So it says group here. Is a group called Office. The ID is Office and the name is Office. They're reflected here. There's no login ID. If I click on the other sections, other rows, the other entries, it updates the entries, the display at the top. So that when you're making your changes, the selected group or user is the one that you're making the changes for. At the top of the screen here, we've got a select list, an insert list, an update list, and a delete list. These are totals which represent the entries in this table rights grid. And for each of these four options, these represent four rights. You can be allowed or restricted, and there's a total that shows at the bottom. Now, as I said before, this is a screen where you inspect to make sure that everything is in order. So typically, you are looking to see that everything is allowed, nothing is restricted, and there's a total at the bottom. So that's typically, okay, in most cases. Now, at present, this particular database I'm looking at has 90 tables. From time to time we add new tables, so this number may increase. And we also may remove tables, so it's also possible for it to decrease. Let's look at the table rights grid now. This is the grid that has the rights for the tables, and the tables in the database are listed here. You've got the name of the table, the group it belongs to, an all option which sets or resets, I should say, these four options here, and then you have individual columns for the four rights. The right to select records, the right to insert records, which is to add records, the right to update records, and the right to delete records. Okay, so those are the rights for each particular table listed here. At the bottom of the screen, you've got various control buttons. There's a whole array of control buttons here, and these perform various functions. We'll go through each of those. So that's a look at the layout of the screen, and let's go into a little bit more detail as to how you would use it. As I said, it's primarily for monitoring to make sure that these numbers here are at the levels they're supposed to be. The readings are what we expect them to be under normal circumstances. But there are times when you may want, there can be times when you wish to change the options in here for a specific group or user, and I will be explaining that during the course of this demo. So we have, as I said before, the groups and users list, which allows you to choose the group or the user whom you wish to make the changes for. Now, what may be helpful is if I move this across a little bit, I open the users screen, the users window, and we've got a list of users here. These are the users in this database. Actually, I could probably put this over here that it cover the main security window, and we can look at the two screens side by side. Now, the first entry is a group called Office. This list of users in the security screen shows that there are 9 users, 1 administrator, 8 regular users, and 9 users in total. Now, administrators have full rights to the database, so administrators would never be shown in the database access screen because you cannot change the rights of an administrator. You can, however, change a login from being an administrator to being either a supervisor or a regular user. So you can take away the powers of an administrator and make them an ordinary user. However, once someone is an administrator, they have full rights to the database in question, and also when actually an administrator has full rights to all the databases on the server, a supervisor has full rights to the selected database. So you would not see for the database access supervisors or administrators listed in here. You're only going to get the regular users who are either individual users or members of a group. Now, in this database, we have a group called, these are the users here. This test user is not, there's a login for a test user, but that login is not assigned to this database, which is why this cell here is blank. So there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 entries in the list. It says 9 is a total because this person is not a member of the users of this database. So that count of 9 represents any entry where you see the user ID has a code entered in there. Of those 9, as I said before, this one here, Steve Corbin, is an administrator. So his name would not appear in here. That name would not appear in here. You have Jane Doe, John Doe, and Michael Smith. They're members of the sales group. So likewise, they are not listed in here because they are members of a group. They're members of the sales group. So when you set the rights, the table rights for the sales group, you're immediately setting the rights for these 3 users who are members of sales. Likewise, there's an office group, and that office group comprises user 3, user 4, and user 5. And when you set or assign the rights, the table rights for the office group, it automatically assigns the rights for these 3 users. Now, we also have in the list a user 1 and a user 2. They are listed in the groups and users list because they do not belong to a group. If you look over here in the users window, the group ID and the group name, they're blank. That means they're not, that indicates that they are not members of a group. Therefore, they are listed individually in here. Now, as we would have explained before in other videos, you create groups so that for users who are going to have the exact same rights, you do not have to assign their rights multiple times. So for example, if you had a group with if these people are in the group, as I said before, the sales group, you assign the rights for the sales, their rights are assigned automatically. Without a group, you would have to assign the rights to Jane Doe, then assign the rights for John Doe, then assign the rights for Michael Smith. For 3 employees, that may not, for 3 users, that may not take a long time to do. But let's say you had 10 users or 20 users. PayPak Professional, usually you do not have that many users of this software in most organizations, but you may have a piece of software which does your billing. You may have a billing program where you may have maybe 20 staff in your organization who access the program at various different levels. Maybe the bulk of them need access to similar features, maybe 15 of them or so, and they have access, and it will be much easier to create a group for them and set the rights for that group once than have to go through and set the rights 15 times for each person. The other side of it is this: people come and people go. So when an employee leaves, let's say you had that group of 15 employees, 15 users of the software. Someone comes on board, someone leaves and a new person comes along. When a new user joins the company and you wish to add them as a user of the software, if they're in a group, you just create the user, create a new login for them, create the user ID, and add them to the group, and automatically their rights are assigned. If you don't have a group, you have to remember, you have to not only assign their rights, but you have to remember which particular rights you gave them. And that can be compounded if you add new staff. You've got 15 members and the business is expanding, you bring on 10 more, and they need access to the billing system too, for whatever reason. Having the group avoids having to set up the various types of rates, because it's not only just, remember, it's not just the database access. You have to set the database access for 10 users. Then you have to set the menu access for 10 users and set the report access for 10 users. And if they are using the software to email documents, maybe to email invoices or quotations or payslips or whatever, you have to set those, configure those settings as well. So making use of groups is an efficient way of managing your users and the resources within the database. So in this case, we have a much smaller number of groups, as is typical with PayPak, because payroll is usually, not everyone in an organization typically will have access to payroll. It's usually just a few select people to whom that privilege is given. So we have 2 groups and 2 users. Each of the groups contains 3 users, and we have these 2 individual users here. So let's just highlight back the office group, which would in this case indicate that we're looking at the settings for user 3, user 4, and user 5. Now, to assign the rights, you will see there are check boxes here. So if I look at the first one, authority branches, this list of table rights here, this can be sorted. It has the list of the tables, and then you have the groups the table belongs to. You can click on the column header to sort by table name or to sort by group. I'm going to leave it at table. The actual changing of the rights occurs by clicking on any of these 5 checkbox columns. If I tick all on, they were already on, but it sets them to on. If I turn it off, those rights are now restricted. So this office group of users, they no longer have access to the authority branches table, which means that they can't display records from it, and they need to be able to display records from it even if they are, for example, looking at the employee records, because for the employees in this database are linked to the authority branches. The authority branch in PayPak would represent, it's used in several places, but one of the places it's used is in the employees screen, and it represents the place where the employees is paid, their bank that they're paid at, or if they're paid by cash or check or whatever. It represents how the person gets paid, or where their pay goes, I should rather say. So if you turn this off for these users and they do not have access to the authority branches, you are going to have a problem if you go to the employee screen and try to and they sign in, they go to the employee screen and they try to display an employee, because part of the employee record, or I should say a linked part of the employee record, is to display the name of the branch to which their pay goes. And if they have no access at all, they can't select it, they will get an error when they try to display that employee record. So that's why the select is important. Now, the employees table is a bit down here. There are other related tables, and as you can see, you have employees, which is the main employee record, but there are a slew of other associated tables which contain related information, not the employee log, but there's a slew of other tables in here which are like subtables of the employee's record. So likewise, as I said with the authority branches, a person who needs to work and update your employee records, or see them, even if they need to see them or to print a report on them, they must have select rights. So let's go back to the top, and I'm going to turn off the select. Remember, if we turn this on, everything's on. If we turn it off, everything is off. Okay? On, off. That's across the board. That's what the all column does. When you tick the all column, it turns everything in that section on or off. If I can also select rights individually. So if I turn on the select, that column is now checked, so the users now have select rights. So they will be able to display employees. They would be able to print reports which include, this is wrong. This should have been authority branches that I was on. Sorry, I was the wrong one. This is, pardon me, it's authority branches I was at. Sorry, right. Okay, so let's turn this on. So with this on, they can now print reports or view reports which include records from the authority branches, fields from the authority branches table. However, they cannot add, which is what the insert column means. They cannot insert. They can't add new authority branches. They can't change authority branches, and they cannot delete authority branches. Those options are off. Now, if you look at the top of the screen, this is what I was referring to when I said that this screen is used for monitoring purposes. This is a very powerful little monitoring display here. If there are 90 tables, typically you want to see that all of these are 90. If something is not allowed, you can see that the select is fine, but for some reason a table has been restricted. One of the tables has been restricted for this group. So in that case, you would come here, you look at it in here, and to correct that, I could either tick them individually like that, or I could have turned on the all and put them back on. So now everything is reset the way it should be. From the time that you tick the checkbox, those rights are assigned. You don't have to select them and click on the update button down here at the bottom of the screen. It's controlled directly from the checkbox selection, on or off. Now if I were to just come here at random and turn off a few of these, just do it like that, you could then see the effect at the top of the screen. So you can see that something in here is not as it is. The best example I could give to match this would be if you have packs of stuff in your warehouse and they're arranged neatly in rows, and then you come and find that they're scattered, that some of them are scattered, and what you do is you would just come back and put them back in the order in which they belong. Now I just at random click some of those, so I'll have to look through these here and turn on or find the ones that I randomly checked just now. There's another one here, there's another one there, there's another one here. I'm missing 3 more. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here. Good, so they're back. Now if things fall out of place, there is a faster way of doing that. Just me randomly turn on these and put them back. Turn off some of them as well. Right, okay, so I've scattered them again, and let's say they got scattered, they got put out of array, okay? And you want to set them back. You do not have to manually search through the list if you don't want to. There's a faster way of doing it, and that's the all button. I click on all, and automatically it sets everything back and it turns on all of the checkboxes. There's a none, which likewise turns off all of the table rights. So at this point, no one in that office group has access to anything, and they will get some serious problems if they try to log in. They won't be able to do anything in the database at all, in the software at all. There's a select column, and in this case now they have select rights only. They don't have insert rights, update rights, or delete rights. Now there is, as I may have mentioned before, one case that I can point to where you may want to change these rights. We had a case some years ago where a company had auditors coming in to inspect their records, and what the company did, they created either a group or a user for the auditors, which will be distinct from the users of the software who have full rights to update records and whatnot. And for that group, for the auditors, they turned on the select just as you see here, but they turned off the insert, the update, and the delete, so that the auditors will be able to go back and look at what transactions had occurred, print whatever reports they want to see from within the system, and at the same time they were restricted, they were blocked from adding new records, updating existing records, or changing existing records, or deleting existing records. So this use of the select option is great if you have users who could be outside of the company or inside of the company. They could be auditors who are coming in to check your books, and you set up a user account for them, give them an admin, give them a login, ID and password, provide them with access to the system, and they can go in there and do whatever they need to do without having to request a staff member to do it on their behalf, because then that ties up the staff member's time. So that was their way of letting the auditors get what they want without disturbing the other users in the company. You can also have a scenario where you have, especially for the payroll, you may have people who process the payroll. They enter the payroll information, they print the pay slips, they update the employees and whatnot. Those are the regular payroll workers. You may also have some management folks in higher levels of management who wish to access the payroll software, maybe to run reports, maybe to look at records and inspect records just as auditors would, but they are internal employees. Okay, so again, just as with the auditors, you can have a group set up or individual user profile set up, set the rights to select only, save them, and then they have permission to access the database. They can go into the database, look and see whatever they wish to see, inspect whatever needs to be inspected, check whatever they need to check, but they can't go in and do any damage. So that's a very useful feature, and it may come in handy for some of you who are watching this video. In this case, however, I'm going to, there's also an, well, before I set them back to all, there's also an insert. We can insert a row for all the, you can insert records for all these selected tables, and it only works for this column here. The update is for the update column only, so they're all on, and the delete is for the delete column only. So these 4 buttons represent individually what this all button can do. So this is the all-powerful all button. It does all, but these are individual ones. So if I turn this off again, just turn everything off, and I can turn on the insert, the update, the delete, and the select. Usually if you want to insert, update, and delete, you should also have select rights, because it begins with being able to see the record. If you can't see it, you can't update it or delete it. Now, equivalent to the selection for the select, insert, update, and delete, you also have 4 buttons to turn them off. So I can turn off the insert, I can turn off the select, I can turn off the update, and I can turn off the delete with one click. I can also, there's also a copy and a paste button. If, for example, these, I'll just turn these ones back on before I forget to reset them. If you have 2 users here, remember, users have to be set individually. We recommend that everyone is turned on. But if for whatever reason you had, say, 2 auditors and they were set up individually, not as groups, but as users only, and you give this user one only select rights, and you also for, well, let's just say that's, but you did not want them going into certain other tables. Let's say you didn't want them seeing this fellow here and this one near top here. Where is it? Come on, right here it is. You don't want them seeing this fellow here, and you don't want them looking at your closed days, for example, and maybe a few others, but that's 3 so far. So for this user, they have select rights on 87 of the 90 tables. Now, if you want to give those same exact rights to another user, that's where the copy and paste comes in. You click on the, having highlighted the person who has the rights set the way you want, you click on the copy button, then you highlight user 2, who has full rights to everything, and then you just click on paste, and there you go. So this person is now identical to that person, and if there were a few things that this person, user 2, had that were different, you could make those changes as well. Okay, but by and large, it's a very useful feature, the copy and paste. You can copy for someone who's exactly the same, and you for some reason you don't want to put them in a group because they may have different sets of rights for other aspects of security. Maybe you never use groups, or maybe you only have 2 users and you don't need to create a group if you only have one, if each user is you know, more or less unique. So that's how that would work, the copy and paste feature. Again, I'm going to set about all the rights here and all the rights here for this user. And just look through the list, demonstrate to make sure no one their rights have not been upset. The next button is the print button. And what the print button does, it gives you a printout of the options for the user. So this is user 2. I'm going to turn off this one, this one, this one, these 2. And when I click the print button, up comes a printout, which we can preview. And that shows you the server name, the database name, whether it's a group or a user, the ID and the name, and then you have the list of the tables, the groups it belongs to, and then the indicator of the table rights. So the select rights, the insert rights, the update rights, and the delete rights. Where they're allowed, there's a green tick. Where they are restricted, there's a red X. Now, because users come and go, maybe your database, suppose something happens and you had to, you'd lost your data for some reason, or you had a new user coming along, or if you had to reset tables or whatever, it's a good idea for some people to print and file this report so that if the security was ever changed, or you need to reset it, or you need to review what rights people were allowed to the database, you can keep this as a record so that to make sure maybe that nobody's changed it, or if it needed to be reset for whatever purpose. So that's a very useful feature there in the printout. I recommend that if you want to, you can print them and store them and file them somewhere. Now, let's set everything back up to all for this user. We have next buttons is the settings and the reset buttons. There is a little divider running down the screen here, and you can use that to position the 2 panes of the grid however you wish. Okay, and the settings button for this particular screen, and there's a settings button in most of the screens in our software, and they work pretty much the same way. It saves any settings for you. This will be your personal user settings, and we can set it here. You click settings, and that pane, when you reload the screen, it will be set at this position. For this screen, that is the only screen element that's updated by the settings. Other users may prefer theirs. They may prefer, maybe they want the window smaller, and they want this across some more or whatever. So that's a personal setting. The reset button will clear the settings so that when you reopen it, it goes back to the default position, which I think in this case is halfway across the screen. The 2 panes are even. Next is the video button, which will play on YouTube. It will open your browser for you and it will replay this same video, so that if you want to go through the section again, if you're in the screen and you can't remember how something works, click on the video and watch it on YouTube. Finally, there's the exit button to take you out of here. So just to recap that screen, because I think that brings us to the end of this video. At the top, there is the server you're connected to. Under that, the database you're connected to, and the changes that you make apply to this particular database, the selected database. Then under this, you have whether you are setting the options for a user or a group, whichever one is currently highlighted. You have the ID and the name for that user or group, and the login ID as well. Over here at the top, probably one of the most important parts of the screen, you've got your totals for the table rights. Select, insert, update, and delete. Which ones are allowed, which ones are restricted, and the overall total. So it may be good every once in a while to just do a little drive-by inspection, come into the screen and just check it. And you can't just look at the first person. Remember, when you come into the screen, it's highlighted with the first entry. So what you want to do is just click, 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 go through the list, or just click on it and just use the arrow keys to go through the rows, and keep your eye on these numbers here to make sure that everything in there is organized the way that it should be, and everything's in order and nothing's out of place. You've got your list of the rights where you can change individual rights if you wanted to set up someone like an auditor or user of the software who's just going to do inquiries or print reports only, read only, access mode you can call it. That's where you can set that. That's easily done by using the buttons again at the bottom, setting everything to none, and just ticking the select button in that particular case. As with the checkboxes, when you turn them on or off, they update automatically. Same thing applies for these buttons here. You've got a refresh, which would refresh your list of groups and users and the table rights. There's the copy button, which can be used to copy the settings for one user and paste them to another user or group. And there's the print button, which prints the report, which can be useful for filing. If you may have a large organization and people have different sets of rights, and you want to be vigilant over who has access to what, it may be useful for you to print this and file it. You can either print it and physically print it out on the printer, or you can save it as a PDF document and file it save it as a file somewhere in a folder on a flash drive or somewhere up on the cloud or wherever. You've got the settings and reset buttons, and you've got the video button. So thank you very much for spending these past 43 minutes or so with me going through this screen. It's been a pleasure as always, and we look forward to the next training video. Take care and goodbye.